It was exactly 8 p.m. when I pulled into an almost empty Burger King parking lot. The neon sign above buzzed and flickered, casting shifting shadows across the pavement, while my stomach growled in desperate protest. I hadn't eaten all day. I was so hungry that nothing else mattered but my usual fix. 3 full meals loaded with extra cheese on every burger, large drinks, and a mountain of fries. I didn't care about the price. I had the cash and an insatiable appetite. Before stepping out of my car, I was about to lower the window when I caught something odd. A static noise so subtle, I almost convinced myself I misheard it. It was barely there, like a whisper between the normal hum of the engine and the night's ambient silence. I hesitated, wondering if it was just interference, but the sound left a lingering chill in my ear. With a determined shrug, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I rolled down the window and announced that I'd be dining inside instead. After all, I was not only ravenous, but also in desperate need of a restroom break. The worker at the window, his face drawn and eyes distant, simply replied in that same mechanical tone, "Understood." Inside, the Burger King felt less like a fast food joint and more like a forgotten relic. The usual sizzle and chatter had been replaced by a heavy, stale silence that clung to every surface. I was the only customer in a place that should have been buzzing with life. After what felt like an eternity, my order arrived, each meal piled high with extra cheese. But my hunger wasn't satisfied. I craved even more. I stepped up to the counter, my voice wavering between hunger and frustration, and said, "Excuse me, I ordered extra cheese, and if you need to charge me extra, that's fine. I've got money. I want even more cheese." The employee's eyes glazed over as he responded in a dispassionate monotone, "We apologize, sir." With robotic precision, he adjusted the order, but his flat tone and the earlier mysterious static nagged at me, as if the place was trying to warn me about something lurking beneath the surface. Needing a break from the unsettling atmosphere, and with that ever-present urge to use the restroom, I made my way down the dim, flickering hallway toward the facilities. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed erratically, creating jittery shadows on the worn-out walls. I hurried to the farthest stall, praying for a moment of mundane normalcy. No sooner had I settled in than a sharp, sudden thud erupted from the adjacent stall. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. Peering through the thin partition, I saw something I couldn't unsee. A pair of battered, worn shoes, inexplicably dangling in midair as if gravity had abandoned them. I blinked hard, my mind racing to rationalize the impossible sight. Then, barely audible yet unmistakable, came a whisper right beside my ear. "You ordered extra cheese." I bolted upright, every nerve on edge. The neighboring stall's door now hung wide open, as if whoever had been there had vanished in a hurry. I rushed to the sink, splashing cold water on my face. In the grimy mirror, I caught a glimpse of my terrified expression and something else. A faint message scratched into the metal of the paper towel dispenser. Hungry. Without another thought, I grabbed my food from the counter and bolted out of the restaurant. Once outside, fumbling with my keys, I risked one last glance in the rearview mirror. There, under the weak glow of a streetlight, stood a solitary figure. I couldn't tell if it was a man or merely a shadow given life, but its silent stare felt accusatory, as if it were silently saying, "You shouldn't have stayed." Even now, whenever I pass by a Burger King or catch a fleeting glimpse of movement in the dark, that night at 8 p.m. comes rushing back. I was just a guy, desperate for a meal and a restroom break, yet I found myself caught in a mystery that defies explanation, a mystery that still haunts me every time I unwrap a burger or sip a drink, whispering softly in the shadows, "Extra cheese." It started like any other night, just me, my rig, and Hapunan. I was about 35 minutes in when a creeping unease settled over me. At first I ignored it, probably just the game messing with my head. Then, movement outside my window, a shadow, long, distorted, slithering across my yard like a corrupted game sprite, stretching and bending in ways that shouldn't be possible. The flickering streetlight made it worse, warping its shape, elongating it unnaturally. My breath caught. "Who is that? Who's out there? Did someone just break in?" I froze, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. The eerie silhouette burned into my mind. For a second, everything felt unreal, like my room wasn't my own anymore. When I finally ended the stream, the unease clung to me like a damp chill. My old headset crackled, low, distant, like rain tapping against a window. Then the static surged, and every monitor in my setup flickered at once, as if responding to it. I swallowed. This wasn't just faulty wiring, this felt personal. Then, just as I was about to take off the headset, a voice, right outside my door. I stiffened, listening. It was the pizza guy, dropping my order onto the small table I kept outside. I always prepaid, so deliveries were usually quick and silent. But this time he was talking, low, nervous. "Been a huge fan for a while. Times are tough. Maybe you'd want to share some blessings?" My stomach twisted. Who the hell is he talking to? I yanked open the door. What was that? I couldn't hear you clearly. The delivery guy stood frozen, his face drained of color, his lips parted slightly before he slowly, very slowly, turned his head to the right. His hand trembled as he lifted it, index finger pointing to something, or someone. "But you were standing right." His voice cracked. His whole body twitched like he was fighting the urge to scream. Then he ran, bolted, full sprint, like his life depended on it. I stood there, heart pounding against my ribs, cold air washing over me. What the hell just happened? After a long moment, I exhaled, grabbed my pizzas, and went inside. I tried to eat, but my mind wouldn't shut up. Had something followed me from Burger King the night before? That same eerie silence. That same feeling of being watched. I had bolted from that parking lot, just like he did now. Was I the next one to see something I wasn't supposed to? Determined to shake it off, I went to replace my headset. At the repair shop, the technician examined it for nearly 20 minutes. Then he looked up with a casual shrug. "No issues. Works perfectly." That should have reassured me. It didn't. I bought a new headset just to be safe. By the time I got home, the whole thing felt like a bad dream. I set up the new headset, tossed the old one onto my desk and prepared to stream again. But then the static, soft at first, then rising, like a whisper pressing against my ears. I froze. It wasn't coming from the new headset, it was coming from the old one. I hesitated before picking it up. The static deepened, twisting, stretching, until buried beneath the noise, I heard it. A voice, soft, feminine. The chant was slow, hypnotic. My throat went dry. My fingers trembled as I traced the chord, inch by inch, until I reached the plug. My stomach dropped. The headset wasn't plugged into anything. And yet, the voice continued. My breath hitched. The static warped, glitching, distorting, until the chant wasn't just a sound anymore. It was layered, like multiple voices stacked on top of each other, slightly out of sync. Some too high, others too deep. It wasn't human. The monitors flickered violently. Shadows shifted in ways that didn't make sense. For a second, just a second, I saw movement in my reflection. But I hadn't moved. Had my late-night horror sessions blurred the line between my game and my reality? Or had I, without realizing it, become part of something waiting on the other side of the screen? My room felt warped, the static pressed into my skull. And then, in the suffocating silence, I let out a bitter chuckle. Maybe I really was in too deep. As the static finally faded into the night, I muttered, "Now I'm left wondering, what's Hapunan? What's happening?" It began on an ordinary night. I was in my room following my usual routine, the soft hum of my PC and the familiar clack of my keyboard. Then everything shifted. I woke up drenched in sweat, my head pounding like a relentless drum. The room had transformed into a claustrophobic labyrinth of brittle, cold plywood that scraped against my skin. The air clung to my flesh, thick with the suffocating scent of salt and something metallic, something disturbingly close to blood. My hands flickered like low-resolution pixels, and every nerve screamed that something was horribly wrong. I fought to steady my racing thoughts. What is happening? Am I losing my mind? The familiar interface of Hapunan, the Filipino horror I'd played moments before sleep, had vanished, replaced by a static-filled void where fragmented memories of a peaceful morning collided with disjointed, nightmarish images. Was my mind merging reality with digital echoes, or was this terror utterly real? A distorted radio crackled to life, its warped voice warning of paid killers roaming the streets. I turned, heart hammering, to see my in-game parents seated at a dinner table. At its center lay an untouched fried chicken. "Tomorrow," my mother intoned in a voice as cold and unyielding as the flickering light overhead. "Tonight we eat tuyo." Her detached words deepened my growing paranoia, a harsh contrast to the warmth of that long-ago sunrise. Dinner became an unsettling, ritualistic charade. The briny taste of dried fish clung to my tongue, while sour anxiety churned in my gut. As my parents sank into their scripted slumber, I gripped my basket of balut and chicharron, my intended merchandise, and stepped out into a night that devoured every ounce of familiarity. Outside, every sensation hit like a shock. My flashlight's beam slashed through the oppressive darkness along a desolate railway track, revealing harsh surfaces and cold, rough plywood pressing into my skin. The sticky residue of salt in the air made each breath a struggle, and amid the silence I heard not only the distant murmur of wind, but also the relentless thump of my own heartbeat. Thump, 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 echoing like a ticking clock, as if time itself were counting down my doom. Then Totoy emerged, a face I recognized from the game, his eyes wide with terror. "What happened to the last vendor?" he whispered, urgency slicing through the night. I could only stutter. "I don't know." His chilling warning cut deep. "Then you better be careful. Don't come back." Had I crossed into a realm where nothing made sense? No scripted encounter followed. The night deepened further. Out of the murk shuffled Madonna, the hunched old woman who always expected free balut. My basket was empty, and her silent disappointment echoed like a broken promise reverberating in the dark. On my way home, as I was about to open the gate, chaos erupted. Multiple gunshots tore through the silence from every direction. I saw armed men storming from house to house, their weapons spitting death. Frozen in terror, I became stone until one of them caught sight of me and gave chase. I slammed the gate in his face, but he was relentless. Desperation forced me to flee. I stumbled, fell, and finally crawled behind a large cold stone. As I pressed my trembling hands against its rough surface, I sensed movement, a presence that sent my heart into overdrive. My pulse pounded, louder than ever. Thump, thump, thump. Their boots scraped deliberately against the pavement, each step echoing as if they were stepping inside my skull, as if they knew exactly where I was. I glanced back and saw an armed man tailing me, his eyes wild with fear. "What now? No, stop!" I screamed silently within. Then, emerging from the shadows like a spectre of retribution, Mangberto appeared. In one swift, ruthless motion, he shot the armed man down. The crack of his gun was a final verdict. Without pausing, Mangberto bolted across to a dilapidated hut, their hideout, nestled right opposite the stone. As he vanished into darkness, his parting words echoed in my mind, a chilling warning that blurred the line between savior and harbinger. Then came the unrelenting chaos. A furious volley of gunshots erupted. I watched, horrified, as over half a dozen armed men crumpled, their bodies collapsing with brutal precision. My pulse pounded in my ears. Tick, tick, tick. Each beat a desperate countdown amid the silence that followed. And then, as if summoned by the very shadows, Mangberto and the remaining attackers melted into the inky black. I lay hidden behind that stone for over 5 agonizing minutes, my mind a storm of frantic questions. Is this a well-rehearsed purge? Am I really here? What is happening? Fragmented thoughts crashed over me, each second stretching into an eternity. Finally, summoning every scrap of courage, I bolted from my hiding place and sprinted toward my only refuge, my home. The door creaked open as I slipped inside. An eerie silence greeted me. My parents were gone. On the dinner table lay my old unplugged headset, its cold surface a stark reminder of the fragile veil between worlds. I hesitated before reaching for it. The moment my fingers brushed the plastic, a soft hum erupted into a warped lullaby, sending shivers racing down my spine. Then, like a lightning strike, the lullaby shattered and a searing pain tore through my skull. I dropped the headset, and in that agonizing instant, I woke up. Gasping, I found myself before my PC in my familiar room. My hands were normal again. The comforting buzz of everyday life had returned, yet the nightmare clung to me, vivid and unyielding. On my desk, the headset still hummed softly, a quiet promise of blurred boundaries. I glanced at the monitor. The game's UI had returned, and a new message scrolled in blood-red letters. Recording saved. With trembling fingers, I clicked play. The footage was unnerving. A view of my in-game character selling balut, but the camera lingered on an inexplicable dark figure standing right behind me. The final shot left me questioning. Was it merely part of the game, or had something else followed me home? As the screen faded to black, a lone, unyielding shadow clung to the far corner, a final, unresolved detail that whispered, somewhere, just beyond my field of vision, something was still watching, still waiting. And in that lingering darkness, my mind churned with 3 unanswerable questions. What is real? What's Hapunan? What's happening?